Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 12:05 p.m. on the 13th of March 2025, and honestly it's been a gorgeous day today, absolutely gorgeous. The lawnmower man came at 7:30 in the morning, which was a bit early. I wasn't expecting him until 8:30. Fortunately I was up and out of bed and I'd just had a shower preparing to get ready before he came at 8:30, so I said to him, just start up the back and I'll get dressed and I'll, move the few. There wasn't anything really to move around because I had everything still under the house from Cyclone Alfred, but I just got out there and picked up a few branches and made his job a little bit easier. So that was wonderful, and then Rati came to clean, she's just left. So that was wonderful too. And it's just a beautiful day outside, really lovely. And still not very well, and sort of took a bit of a dive this morning with my asthma, but soldiering on as I do every day. Anyway, I thought I'd continue reading the Dreamfighter and other creation tales, and we're up to story titled The Dreamfighter, and so that should be interesting given my nickname was also Psychedelic Dreamer, or that was my nickname on Pal Talk for about 16 years, so I still identify by that name even though I'm not really haven't been on Pal Talk for quite some time now, 5 or 6 years. Anyway, to my Pal Talk friends that still watch my videos and still keep contact with me, to you my darlings, hope you're having as lovely a day as I am, and the psychedelic dreamer keeps on dreaming. So one of the things I do best. So now we're going to read about the Dream Fighter. Fighting for my rights is another thing I'm very good at, exhaustingly so, but someone's got to do it, might as well be me. I was telling Rati about the fracas about the box trailer with my neighbour down the road. I said, here I was with a chest cold, feeling very weak and ill, and had to go to war to protect my space, so she laughed too. I said, there's no respite for the psychedelic dreamer, the Tanya or Mama T, none at all, no fucking respite. But having said that, today I'm having a respiteful day because it's lovely. Sun's shining. Even I took a photo of a lovely young female scrub turkey. I think she was still young. She was fully fledged in the adult feathers, but small, quite small, lying down in the back of near the fairy corner that I've designated the fairy corner, lying there just looking at me so sweetly. So to put her up, a photo of her up on Instagram as well. So yes, it's nice to have a day where I'm free of chaos and trauma and worries and other people's fucking fecked up shenanigans. May it continue for a long time. Hopefully that cyclone blew a lot of the evil out. We can have some lovely times ahead of us for the next few months at least. Be'ezrat Hashem, by the will of God. So we'll read the Dreamfighter. God was in a bad way. The trouble was, things from outer space. These alien beings would land at night, dress themselves in nightmare and creep into his ear. I call them worm tongues. I didn't invent that. It comes from Lord of the Rings, by the way. Worm tongues, particularly savage, vicious, low vibration entities. There's a lot of that going on in the world. Worm tongues. Right. His sleep was gone. The only way he could escape the attacks of these ferocious beings was to stay awake. So night after night he paced to and fro in his workshop. Sometimes, for sheer weariness, he would sit. But then if he closed his eyes, even for a moment, his head would loll forward and he would be asleep. And a nightmare would creep into his ear. I haven't thought about that, whether God actually has nightmares before. It's the stuff of nightmares, don't they say? What if God was one of us, just having a nightmare? What happens when God wakes up from his own nightmares? Does he take action, create a better world, another universe somewhere else, where things are lovely all the time? Or does he just sit on his hands and hunker down and hope someone else takes care of business for him? Like my neighbours when I had to go to war with that defunct fucking misfit across the road. All cowards, all of them cowards. It's a terrifying thought. We're on the brink of World War III and I've got to live with actual fucking feted cowards. Leave an older woman to fight their wars for them. Sick because they're that inept. What am I going to do about it? Can't afford to move anywhere else, can I? Awful feeling. It's a very awful feeling. But anyway, I guess I always did say I'll fight on my feet till the day I die. So that's what I'll be doing. Fighting on my feet every day in every way. No choice. No choice since I live amongst the weak and the inept and the treacherous and the cowardly. Horrifying, horrifying thought. But anyway, and that's not a worm tongue worming into my ear. That's based on actual evidence and facts. Not one of them came and said, Tanya, you were right, it was dangerous. Not one. Quite prepared to have their own little babies and children put at risk, by the way. This is how inverted and insane our world has become. They don't even protect their own children from anything. Makes your blood run cold. Well, anyway, I protected my children as best as I could in actual, real danger, life-threatening situations, and now they hate me, so can't win. Maybe my neighbours are right to just sit there and hunker down like lemmings, waiting for the shoe to fall, and knowing that their kids are just as much at risk as they are. Just let it all happen for the sake of peace and harmony and cognitive dissonance and denial. And I can't respect people that don't at least stand up for their own rights and try to protect their own homes and bodies and their own children, though. I really can't. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with them? I know what's wrong with them. We won't say it, but I sing to that song regularly it used to be almost every weekend. I don't realise why that song has meaning to me, because I live amongst them, actual zombies that won't protect their own. Leave me to die instead. But she's old and nobody wants her. She's poor. It'd be quite good if she dies and we can have her house and land and put a gigantic mausoleum on it. That's their logic. That's their Nazi fucking logic. Anyway, where was I? Started this video saying what a beautiful day it is, how happy I am. So let's revert to that. Focus on the positives, not on the rabid and the verminous and the evil. It's real, it's all around me, I can't escape it, but I too can go into la la land and pretend that everything's kosher and copacetic and sweet. For now, babies. Right, so a nightmare would creep into his ear. He'd stopped doing any real work creating real creatures. He made a few plants. Doodling with clay, he made a few kinds of fly. But his heart wasn't in it. The truth was, he felt too sleepy. One afternoon, sleep was weighing heavy on him. Struggling to keep awake, he began to doodle with clay, and this time, yawning, rubbing his eyelids that kept trying to stick together and almost dreaming with his eyes open, he made an odd thing. It was red, with red eyes, about the size of an Alsatian dog. 6 skinny legs. It waved 2 feelers, and it stared at him, and it cried, "What am I?" God stared back. He had simply no idea what it was or what to call it. Usually when he made a creature, he had a pretty strong picture of what he wanted and why he wanted it. But this time, his mind was blank. "What am I?" it cried again, shivering. God scratched his head and yawned. He supposed he ought to give it a name. "Tell me what I am," cried the creature. "Tell me what I have to do." But God's head had already fallen forward and a snore came out of his beard. The creature blinked its red eyes and strayed into the forest. For a long time it simply stood under a tree. Other creatures going busily past looked sideways at it and said, "A new one! What are you?" The creature didn't know what to say. A baboon marched past. "Ha ha!" it barked. "A newcomer. Name, please." When the creature didn't answer, Baboon gave it a shove and it collapsed like an ironing board. It got up slowly. "Can't you speak?" asked the baboon. "Then you must be a mutant. Get it? Mute-ant." And the baboon rolled over backwards, beating its head with mirth. Ran off to tell some gazelles. "Mutant," thought the creature. "Well, maybe I am. Maybe the monkey's right." But that didn't help. He still didn't know what to do. And the trouble was, he didn't feel like doing anything either. The cheetah hurtled past along the trail of dust left by, I don't know how to pronounce this, Geranook. I'm going to have to Google it. It's going to drive me mad. Here we go. People of Earth. Some of you are laughing because you know how to pronounce it. Well, I don't. So I admit when I don't know something. Also known as the giraffe gazelle, is a long-necked medium sized antelope. Do you want to see what it looks like while we're Googling and looking at things? Still doesn't tell me how to pronounce it though. Right, my mother's name Gisela was German for gazelle too. Yeah. She was about as graceful as a brick shithouse, my mother. She was an evil piece of shit. She really was. I'm not being unreasonable. She really was. Though she was very light on her feet and was a very good dancer. better dancer than me, actually. But graceful, no. How to pronounce. Maybe, why do I not think of my mother as graceful? She was always angry and vicious and nasty. Maybe that's what it is. It's the energy. I suppose somebody would say that about me one day. That I wasn't graceful, gracious, or obsequious, or submissive, or grovelling, or weak. And I'm okay with that. Right. I just want to know how to pronounce. Geranuk. I've never heard of that in my entire life, and I'm old.
Geranuk.
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 Geranuk. Is it saying
Geranuk.
Geranuk or Geranuk?
Geranuk.
Geranuk, I think he's saying. Okay.
Geranuk. Geranuk. Geranuk.
No, it says Geranuk. Well, there you go. According to this, it's a Geranuk, a type of gazelle that's 6 foot tall. Well, that's 5 minutes of our lives we'll never get back. Can't even find where we were at now. Right. The cheetah hurtled past along the trail of dust left by a geranuk, and he heard its claws hissing. Faster, faster! What was the hurry? Indeed. Can't go any faster than a cheetah. They run at 80 kilometres per hour. It's one thing I know for a fact. One of the facts stored on my memory banks. All the other useless facts that will never make me a supermodel or rich and famous or beloved. Okay, maybe a little bit beloved. Some people like my brand of sardonism, but some people don't. Small violin. Delete, 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 delete. Cheetah running as fast as he can, running even faster. But where was I? I'm fine fettle today. It's because it's a beautiful day and I've outlived those creeps down the road. How long will I have outlived them for? How long is a piece of string? It's all in the lap of the gods. A long line of new heads bowed with effort, climbed away north grunting, North! North! Where were they all going? And just above him 2 wrens came and went, came and went, came and went, every half minute, holding a feather or a string of moss or a stalk of grass. Why were they so busy? He watched some flamingos, holding their heads upside down, half under water. What were they trying to do? If I'm a mutant, he thought. What does a mutant do? Why did God make me? I'm not properly made. I don't seem to fit. He must have left something out of my works. He walked round, watching the animals and the birds, all so busy. How do they know what to be busy with, he thought. He did feel completely left out. That same day, God advertised for a bodyguard to defend him from his nightmares. Must be a good night worker and Dreamfighter, said his ad. 3 creatures had applied: leopard, wolf, and owl. God was giving each one a try. Leopard first, then wolf, then owl. By the way, just a quick segue, every night when I'm lying in my bed, still awake, not yet asleep, just with my mask on, lying there, sometimes musing about my day and waiting to drift off to sleep, something jumps into bed with me. Every night now, it's been like that for about 3 weeks. It's a little bit freaky. I'm not scared per se, I just say the shema. Whoever it is knows he's on its way. But I'm starting to wonder if it's somebody bilocating. Because one night it actually felt like a person, like a man, had just climbed into bed and rolled over to look at me. Last night it felt more like a small animal, like a cat or a dog. I could hear the thump as it landed on the right side of my bed. So it's a bit odd, but not threatening, just unusual. The fact that it's happening every single night too. But unusual. So I'm saying it out on YouTube because I'm paying attention. Paying attention, people of Earth. I have had a friend over the years who was a Maduan that said he would visit at night, but only one of the nights did it feel like a human spirit climbing into bed with me, which was a bit confronting, to be honest. They didn't do anything, fortunately, but every night without fail, either an spirit animal jumps into my bed or a person. It's odd. You can even feel the bed shake as it's odd. First I thought, it must be a little earth tremor, but we don't get a lot of earth tremors here in Brisbane. I mean, on occasion we do, but they're rare. So it can't be that because it's happening every night. Anyway, I guess it's time I do a full-blown exorcism, but I'm reluctant to do that unless I feel actually threatened, and whoever it is isn't threatening. It's just as I'm just lying there quietly, preparing to drift off, they just make their little presence known. Anyway, just wanted to make a record of that, because should it get worse into something threatening, you will all know that I've mentioned it. And I'm not crazy that it's actually a real manifestation. Anyway, like I said, I just lay there last night. I thought, are you here to threaten, or what are you doing here? So I just said the Shema, and first 2 lines of the Shema, and it just kind of didn't really do anything. It didn't dissipate, but it didn't intensify. It just kind of went very calm and kind of serene and drifted off to sleep. So there is that. See, Mama T's so used to fighting even spiritual wars that even spooks jumping into bed with her doesn't faze me that much. Well, I've had a lifetime of that sort of thing going on. When I lived at Logan Lee, I used to have what felt like the ghost of a very large cat would jump into bed with me. But in those days, living there, I didn't have a cat. So I'd think, was it one of the spirits from one of my dead cats visiting me? But at first, that happened for quite a long time. But at first I thought I was imagining it, but then I'd sort of sit up and there'd be an indentation on the doona beside me as if a cat had actually been lying curled up there. And I'm like, you can't fake an indentation. You can't imagine that, I used to worry about that I was going crazy back in those days because I was suffering very severe post-traumatic stress disorder, having just escaped those fucking filthy Moroccan Israelis. So I used to wonder how much of it was stress and how much of it was real, but I'd see the indentation, I'd get the kids, come and have a look at this, what does that look like? I'd say, it looks like something was lying there, Mummy. Right? Oh good, you see that too, I'm not imagining it. My girls were used to it living with me too, all the spooky things. That house at Logan Lee was actually quite haunted. Had a lot of little weird poltergeist things or strange occurrences. Anyway, we'll carry on with the story. But none of them could stand up to the space beings. The first night, Leopard saw two eyes coming closer. They were very like his own, but much bigger. They look like eyes, thought Leopard, but they are probably flying saucers. He decided to attack, but when he leapt, the moment his feet left the ground, he felt suddenly dizzy. When he landed, he was spinning like a top. Not only was he spinning like a top, somebody was lashing him with a whip to keep him spinning. With an extra crack, the whip lifted him out over the forest, and he crashed into a thorn bush. Scrambling out of the thorns, he shot off to his cave. That night, God had a shocking nightmare. He was a leopard spinning down a plug hole. The plug hole was too small, so he was having to become very thin till he was no thicker than his own tail. So he spun down the plug hole and came out as an immensely long, twisting leopard's tail writhing among the stars, which were all quaking with laughter. He woke up shouting, and no wonder. The wolf did no better. The wolf didn't know what had happened to Leopard. He saw two eyes coming closer. He thought it was another wolf. He went forward warily. It seemed to be another wolf, very like himself. They touched noses. As they touched noses, the other breathed in fiercely with a sudden whistling, sucking breath, and Wolf felt himself being sucked in and actually turned inside out inside the other wolf. How can this be? He howled, and his howl too was inside out. Ears started itching randomly. Oh. Then the other wolf sneezed, and Wolf shot away into the darkness, once again outside out and inside in, but so terrified that when he landed he went on running till next morning. From this moment he became 3 times as wary. But while Wolf was still running, God had a shocking nightmare. He dreamed he was first turned inside out, then blown up like a very big, very tight balloon. And that's how he spent the night, inside out, blown up as a big balloon, bobbing among the freezing, prickling stars. Owl had the worst time. Owl saw 2 eyes coming closer. He'd heard what had happened to Leopard and to Wolf, so he wasn't very happy. He was wishing he hadn't taken this work on, but he was brave, and he was thinking, I'll attack and just grab at those eyes. If I can get my hands on his eyes, he'll be helpless. So he attacked. But instead of landing with outstretched, grasping feet on a solid creature's head, as poor Owl expected, he was hit by something springy, light, flat, and very tough. It sent him spinning, and then the same thing, with a whiffling whop, hit him again from the other from the other direction and sent him spinning back, and hit him again from the other direction, and so it went on. And Al had no idea what was hitting him or what was going on, except he was being slapped helplessly through the air, first one way, then the other, with whacking, whiffling blows. Making a terrific effort, he flung out his wings and flew straight upwards. He was free. He hurtled home, all his feathers broken and bent. He squeezed himself into the back of his tree hole. He closed his eyes tight. No more bodyguard jobs for him. Meanwhile, God was having an awful nightmare. 2 giant tennis rackets were batting him to and fro across a net in which the knots were stars. Every sort of shot, lob and whack, slice and volley slam. God spun in the air, or he flashed like a bullet. Sometimes he hit the net, and stars showered. Then the racket flipped him up, and pop, away he went again. He woke next morning, hardly able to move. After this, animals stopped applying. So God advertised again, and this time, as well as asking for a good night worker and Dreamfighter, the ad said, "Pay in advance, 1 wish fulfilled." When Mutant heard of this, he thought, what if I ask him to make me busy? That's my only wish. So he applied. When God saw him, he was astonished. He couldn't remember making him. And when he heard the wish that Mutant wanted fulfilled as advance pay, he laughed. Sleepy as he was, he actually laughed. "Oh well," he sighed. "Granted, you'll certainly need to be busy to keep the nightmares off me. Yes, I grant you 10 times the natural dose of busyness. That should be about right." And he laughed again. Mutant's eyes blinked furiously, without waiting for God to say any more. He dashed outside. It was already dusk. What time did the space beings start their attack? He raced over God's roof, through the forest and up a mountain. On the peak he stood on his hind legs, waving his feelers. Then he raced around the hills, from peak to peak. He raced the whole way round the circle of hills and back to God's house. He felt very strange. So this, he thought, is what it is to be busy. He felt as if all his limbs were about to burst into flames. He had to move, and move very fast, and keep moving to escape the feeling, which was actually rather awful. But what now? Where were the attackers? It was dark. Where were the eyes he'd heard so much about? He raced in a circle round God's house, up over the roof and back again. And there they were, the eyes. Mutant didn't wait for a second. He dashed straight in. He felt the dizziness bounce off his hard skin. It knocked him off balance, but only for one of his lightning strides. Then he felt the dreadful suction pump clamped over his face. But he clashed his pincers and shredded it before it could suck him inside out. Then the springy, hard light bat hit him, but he clung to it, ran over the mesh and down the handle and over the fingers gripping the handle and seized the wrist in his pincers. A most horrible screech went up. God peered through his window and saw an immense shape floundering in the darkness, and he heard trees crashing. Then a tearing cry of pain, and then more cries and groans going off through the forest with splintering tree boughs. The cries seemed to climb the mountainside, then go off, up into space. Mutant appeared in God's doorway. He was dragging something. First God thought it was a rhinoceros without a head. Then he saw it was a colossal hand. Mutant had brought him the nightmare's hand. From that night, Mutant's life changed. He became God's bodyguard, and all the creatures heard about him with awe. He certainly did some amazing things. The space beings didn't stop trying to get at God. Every night, Mutant raced through the forests and over the mountains, to and fro, and here and there, over God's roof and around his house, all at top speed, and the space beings simply couldn't outwit him. No matter what shape they took, he was ready, he was there, with his terrific activity. One came as a fog, but Mutant grabbed a blazing log from God's kiln and raced through and through the fog till he found the heart of it, a kind of big soft spider dangling on a thread from space. When he plunged the torch deep into the spider, the whole fog fell as a 2-minute rain of honey blobs. Mutant licked his feet and tasted the honey blobs. He had seen the other creatures eating. In fact, they did little else but eat. This was the first time Mutant had tasted anything. He whistled with delight. He spent the rest of that night licking the leaves, the grass, even the bare ground. At last, he thought, I found something to live for. Next night, as he raced in his protective circles, he noticed a slender bamboo shoot growing beside God's door. Strange, he thought, and raced on. By midnight, no space being had appeared, but the bamboo was as thick as an elephant's leg, and its leaves leaned in through God's doorway. And then, as Mutant dashed over God's roof, For the 50th time that night, he heard God groan on his bed. Had the nightmare got through? Mutant hurled himself at the bamboo and crushed its thickness with his pincers. The splintering was also a screech, and all the leaves flew like knives. Mutant shook his head like a dog, and the bamboo toppled. Honey welled out of the mangled stump, and Mutant was still feeding there when God got up next morning. Looking at the stump and the fallen bamboo, God said, "That reminds me, I dreamed. My spine was a bamboo tree. I was growing in a swamp. It was horrible. Then man came in a canoe, cut me down and made me into an organ pipe, a giant flute, and that was beautiful." Mutant, his pincers deep in the oozing honey, tried to smile. Every night, Mutant overpowered a different space being. But now he was not only defending God from space beings and the nightmares they came in, he was keeping up the honey supply for himself, since every space being, somehow or other, shed honey. Feeding on the honey, his busy energy became fiercer than ever. But something else was happening too. Mutant was growing. At the end of the first month, after about 30 nights of victorious dream fighting, Mutant was the size of a camel. At the end of the second month, he was the size of an elephant. "God's bodyguard," he cried, "needs the weight." Now, as he raced through the forest and over the mountains, he travelled along the deep lanes he had worn. His passing sounded like a motorboat as his 6 feet pounded the earth. God was sleeping well. He was so pleased with Mutant, he built him a special tower beside his own house. Mutant would race to the top of it and survey space. During the day, to use up his busyness, he dug cellars under it and deepened tunnels down to deeper cellars. He called the tower the palace, and God, seeing him grow, changed his name from Mutant to Giant. The other creatures began to be alarmed. For one thing, when was Giant going to stop growing? That worried them. He was already bigger than any of them. For another thing, it was becoming quite difficult to sleep. All night long, Giant was charging along his trails, through the forest, up the mountain, over the peaks, back through the forest on his maze of different paths. And the din was terrific. It was like living in the middle of a permanent speed track. And not only was the noise impossible, the earthquaking was worse. He was getting to be so tremendously heavy. And every 3 minutes or so, he let out a shattering roar. Make way for God's bodyguard. At last, the creatures came to God and complained. As he gets heavier and bigger, cried Sloth, he gets faster. He's forever shaking me off my branch just by pounding past. And the accident rate, cried a shrew, it's going up and up. Why can't he fly? Giant listened as he paused deep in the earth, working at one of his cellars. He dashed up and sprang out in front of the creatures. "Complaints?" he bellowed. "What do you want? Me or no me, and God going crazy with nightmares? Which of you serves God as I do? Which of you will take my place to defend God?" The creatures all sidled away. Giant certainly scared them. His eyes were really quite terrible. He was obviously trembling with eagerness to attack somebody. God frowned and scratched his chin through his beard. If it weren't for those space beams and the nightmares, he was thinking, the world might be a nicer place without Giant. He was getting to be a bit too much of a good thing. But so long as the space beings kept coming. The night after that, they stopped. Had Giant finished them off? He raced along his trails. On into the dawn, he was rushing from peak to peak, gazing into space, waving his feelers. Where were the space beings? That was his first night without honey, but the second night was the same, and the third. On the fourth day, he lay still on his tower. He was thinking, what if space beings are over? Then he whispered, what if the honey's finished? His legs jumped into action. He raced into the forest. At one point, he stopped and roared. All creatures, great and small, will bring honey to Giant. Failure will be punished. He then seized Linnet by the scruff of the neck. Where is the honey? You pay your taxes in honey, and you pay them to me. Linnet squirmed. What could he say? So Giant flung him into one of the cellars under the palace. When Bullfinch, Newt and Giraffe had joined Linnet in Giant's cellars, the other creatures learned. They began to squeeze nectar out of the flowers and brought it to Giant. Even Leopard brought him some on a leaf. Not enough, roared Giant, and pushed Leopard down into one of the cellars. Few of the animals brought much. Pretty soon the cellars of the palace hummed like a great beehive with the sobbing and wailing of the imprisoned animals. God realized something had to be done. Giant, he thought, has gone crazy. When he asked Giant to let the animals go, Giant stared at him, incredulous. But, he gasped, they didn't bring me any honey. God nodded. And keeping his voice very gentle and calm, he asked, but does that really matter? Giant almost squeaked. Matter, he cried. What if I don't have honey? How can I guard you? I need the strength. God nodded again. Very true, he said. But, he added, maybe I don't need guarding anymore. The space beings have stopped. Giant let out a blasting screech like a steam whistle and stared at God, thunderstruck. I serve you, he bellowed finally. I am your bodyguard. That is my life. Don't you understand what it means to be the bodyguard of God? God gazed at Giant. This peculiar creature, he was thinking, really has gone crazy. Who else but I can fight the space beams? Giant continued at the top of his voice. Without me, you'd be a sleepless wreck. Your creation would fall to bits. So I need energy. I need honey. Giant stood there. He looked exactly like a house-sized statue, made of girders and ship's boilers, all glowing red hot. His eyes looked like welders' flames. Even God felt quite alarmed. But then he had a brainwave. What about the bees? He asked. Giant frowned and sparks crackled. Bees? The honeybees, said God. Let all the animals go free, and Honeybee henceforth will work only for you. So Giant let all the animals go free and waited. Now that his limbs were still, his mind was going faster and faster. He was trying to calculate how many bees he would need. But God was also thinking hard, and at last he knew what to do. First of all, he hung a wet sack over the sun. Next, the wild goose and the swan brought him snow. He modelled the snow into a figure exactly like a woman, but as big as himself. There she stood in front of his workshop. Now he sent Magpie to advertise a new job, a bodyguard for God's bride. All the creatures came running. Even wild goose and swan gazed in wonder at the beautiful snow maiden. Was God getting married? The creatures were wild with excitement. But Giant too had emerged. He stared at the dazzling white figure. He was very angry, and when he spoke, he had difficulty forming the words because all he wanted to do was roar with rage. All creatures, he cried, will go home. The bodyguard of God is also the bodyguard of the bride of God. God came out of his workshop. But Giant, he said, I thought you couldn't work without honey. The bees will take some time, you know, getting you a good enough supply to start you off again. I'm afraid my bride needs a bodyguard now. I don't need honey, choked Giant. I am her bodyguard. I am your bodyguard. I am the only bodyguard. But she is so beautiful, said God. Something will surely steal her. While you're racing about over the mountains, she'll be snatched by the bride snatcher from inside the earth. By who? Giant had never heard of the bride snatcher inside the earth. God sighed. A terrible being, worse than any space being. He comes light as a breath, invisible as a breath, soundless as a breath. Test me, cried Giant. But God only shook his head. If she were to be stolen, he began. Then he stopped and sighed again. I'll find her, Giant cried. I would never stop till I found her and rescued her. God seemed to think deeply. All right, he said at last. But promise, if she is stolen, you will never stop till you have found her and brought her back. Giant nodded. He felt if he spoke he would burst into tears of rage. How could God doubt him? Swear, said God sternly. I swear, cried Giant through his clenched teeth. Very good then, said God. You are her bodyguard. And as he went back into his workshop, he casually drew the sack, now almost dry, off the sun. The next hour was the most terrible time of Giant's life. The sun's great beams blazed down on the Snow Bride, and as Giant stood staring at her, she began to sink slowly into the ground. He raced round her in tight circles, trying to see where she was going, but it was no use. And the moment came when the last glint of snow melted into the sodden ground. He could not believe it. He stared at the place till the ground was dry. Then he began to race to and fro over it, looking for a way in and whimpering like a little puppy dog. God came out. He stood there, simply nodding. He seemed to be beyond anger. And when Giant saw the grim look on his face, he cried, I'll find her, I'll find her. How? Asked God, and stood silent. Somehow, cried Giant. However are you going to get into the crannies of the earth where the bride snatchers carried her off? I knew this would happen. Make me small, make me tiny, wept Giant. I'll find her. Well, said God, if I did that, at least you'd have no problem finding enough honey. Very well, I'm relying on you. And God snapped his fingers. Giant saw everything grow suddenly enormous. The grass blades towered far above him. The forest loomed like a green, stirring thunderstorm. God looked down. Giant, no bigger than a fly, was scrambling over the crumbs of soil. Try every hole, boomed God, high up in the sky. Try every cranny, and when you found her, let me know. He went back into his workshop, whistling a little tune under his breath. Then the baboon danced up. Gee up, Giant, he laughed. She's getting further away all the time. Now you'll need your famous speed. Gee up. And Parrot cried, Gee up, Giant. And the elephants, blinking sleepily, rumbled, Gee up, Giant. Pretty soon, G-Up Giant was simply called G-Up Ant. G-Up, G-Up Ant, laughed the jackass. Giant, now so tiny, began racing in and out of the wormholes. And he has never since been able to rest. Where can he ever find the maiden of melted snow? Where did she go? But still he races along, deep in forests, under all the roots, and far out over deserts, down every crack in the baking crust. He races over the world, unresting. Where could she be? Where is she? Poor old ant, sighs the sloth. And I'll just leave it at that one story today, because I need to rest too. And my throat's a bit sore, not sore but dry, and I want to enjoy the beautiful sunshine while we have sunshine. And yes, there is that. So I hope you enjoyed that story, and I'll be back tomorrow with another one. The next story tomorrow is called Gozzy. As you can guess, is about a gosling. It's quite a short one. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow. Have a beautiful day wherever you are in the space-time continuum. And remember, as always, to never ever let the bastards grind you down, and enjoy the sun when it shines and the rain when it rains, because that too is needed for the garden. Though here in Brisbane we've had quite a lot of rain with Cyclone Alfred, so we're ever so slightly over that. But everything in its season, am I right? Just go with the flow. Bye for now, people of Earth. Take good care.